Sold by her cruel father at 16, the obese girl was shocked by the lone rancher's unexpected plans. The gunshot split the morning air before Jake even reached the barn. He dropped to the ground, his hand moving to the revolver on his hip. The bullet had come from somewhere near the water tower. Someone on his own ranch had just tried to kill him. Jake crawled behind the feed trough and scanned the area. Nothing moved. Whoever fired that shot knew what they were doing. They knew his morning routine.
They knew he walked to the barn at exactly 6:15 every day. That meant it was someone who worked for him.
He had 12 people on his payroll. Any one of them could be the shooter. The ranch stretched across 3,000 acres of Texas grassland. His father built it from nothing, and Jake spent 20 years turning it into the most profitable cattle operation in the county. Now someone wanted him dead for it. Another shot rang out. This one hit the trough inches from his head. Jake rolled left and fired twice toward the water tower. He heard boots running on wooden planks. The shooter was moving. Jake sprinted toward the stable. His horse, a gray mare named Dust, whinnied as he burst through the door. He grabbed a rifle from the rack and positioned himself at the window. The ranch yard looked peaceful. Too peaceful. His foreman, Carl, came running from the bunkhouse. The older man had his rifle ready. Carl had worked for Jake's father for 30 years. Jake trusted him more than anyone. But that bullet came from somewhere, and Carl knew the routine too. Jake watched Carl scan the area. The foreman moved like a man looking for danger, not like a man who just caused it. But Jake had learned the hard way that appearances meant nothing. 3 months ago, his account disappeared with $40,000. Jake hired him personally, trusted him with everything. The man had dinner at Jake's table every Sunday. Then one morning, he was gone. The bank accounts were empty. 2 months ago, someone poisoned 15 head of cattle. The veterinarian said it was deliberate. Jake suspected everyone. He questioned everyone. No answers came. Last month, a fire started in the hay barn. If the wind had been blowing east instead of west, the whole ranch would have burned. The sheriff called it an accident. Jake knew better. Now someone was shooting at him on his own property. Carl reached the feed trough. He knelt down and looked around. Jake stayed hidden in the stable. He needed to see what Carl would do. The foreman moved toward the water tower with his rifle raised. He climbed the ladder slowly. Jake watched through the rifle scope. Carl reached the platform and looked down. He picked something up, a shell casing. Carl climbed down and walked toward the stable. Jake moved away from the window and waited by the door. When Carl entered, Jake had the rifle pointed at his chest. Carl froze. His eyes went wide. He dropped the shell casing and raised his hands. "You planning to shoot me, boss?" Jake kept the rifle steady. "Someone just tried to kill me. That shot came from the tower." Carl nodded slowly. "I heard it. Found this up there." He pointed at the shell casing on the ground. 45 caliber. Same as half the rifles on this ranch. "Where were you when the first shot fired?" "In the bunkhouse. Getting dressed. You can ask the others." Jake lowered the rifle slightly. "The others could all be lying too. Anyone on this ranch could be bought." He learned that with the accountant. Carl picked up the shell casing and handed it to Jake. "Someone wants you dead. We need to figure out who before they try again." Jake took the casing. It was still warm. "We don't know anything. You could have fired that shot and climbed down before I got here." Carl's jaw tightened. "I've worked for your family since before you were born. If I wanted you dead, you'd be dead. That's what worries me. You know everything about this place. You know everyone. You know every blind spot and every schedule. So do 10 other people on this ranch." "Exactly." Jake walked to the window and looked out. His ranch hands were emerging from the bunkhouse now. They looked confused and concerned. One of them was a killer. Carl moved beside him. "We lock down the ranch. Nobody leaves. We question everyone." Jake shook his head. "Whoever did this is smart. They'll have an alibi. They'll have a story. We won't find anything by asking questions. Then what do we do?" Jake watched his employees gathering in the yard. Someone out there wanted him dead. Someone he paid. Someone he fed. Someone who smiled at him every day while planning murder. "We wait." Jake checked his revolver. "Sooner or later, they'll try again. And next time, I'll be ready." The sun climbed higher over the ranch. Jake stood in the stable doorway and studied every face in the yard. One of them was a murderer. One of them was a liar. One of them would try again. He just had to figure out which one before they succeeded. The ranch spread out before him like a chessboard. Every building was a hiding place. Every shadow held a threat. His father built this place with trust and hard work. Now trust was the one thing Jake couldn't afford. Carl stood beside him in silence. Even the foreman, his father's oldest friend, was a suspect now. Everyone was. Jake holstered his revolver and walked into the sunlight. His employees watched him approach. He saw concern in some faces. Fear in others. But he couldn't tell if that fear came from worry about their boss or worry about getting caught. He would find out soon enough. Someone on his ranch was a killer. And Jake wasn't going to stop until he knew who. Jake gathered everyone in front of the main house. 12 faces stared back at him. Men he had known for years. Men he had hired himself. Men he had trusted with his livelihood and his life. One of them had just tried to end both. Someone took a shot at me this morning. Jake's voice was calm and cold. 2 shots. From the water tower. If anyone knows anything, speak now. Silence. The ranch hands looked at each other. Some seemed genuinely shocked. Others looked nervous. Jake watched every reaction and trusted none of them. Carl stepped forward.
We found a shell casing.
45 caliber. Anyone missing ammunition? More silence. Jake studied each face carefully. His eyes moved from person to person, searching for guilt, for fear, for any sign of deception. He saw plenty of all 3, but that proved nothing. An innocent man could be scared. A guilty man could look calm. Nobody leaves the ranch until we sort this out. Jake pointed at Carl. You organize search parties. Check every building, every hiding spot. Find that rifle. The men dispersed slowly. Jake watched them go, memorizing who walked together, who avoided eye contact, who seemed too eager to help. Trust no one. That was his new rule. Trust absolutely no one. The day passed in tense silence. The search parties found nothing. No rifle, no evidence. Whoever fired those shots had hidden their weapon well or thrown it away entirely. Jake stayed armed and alert. Every shadow made him reach for his gun. Every sound made him turn. Night fell over the ranch like a heavy blanket. Jake sat in his study with the lights off. He could see the bunkhouse from his window, could see who came and went, could watch for anything suspicious. But nothing happened. The night stayed quiet. Too quiet. Tomorrow would bring answers. It had to. Because Jake knew one thing for certain. The shooter would try again. And next time Jake would be waiting. Carl knocked twice and entered. His face was grim. Jake turned from the window. What did you find? Nothing. Carl sat down heavily. No rifle, no tracks. Whoever did this covered their traces well. Jake nodded. He expected as much. Someone this careful wouldn't leave evidence lying around. There's something else. Carl leaned forward. 3 of the men want to leave. They say they don't feel safe here anymore. They want their pay, and they want to go. Jake felt anger rise in his chest. Let them go. Anyone who wants to leave can leave. But they don't get paid until this is resolved. That's not legal, boss. I don't care. Jake turned back to the window. Someone tried to kill me. I'm not handing out money until I know who. The men won't like that. Then they can stay and prove they're innocent. Jake's voice was ice. Or they can leave and look guilty. Their choice. Carl stood slowly. You're making enemies, Jake. Real enemies. Not just one shooter. All of them. Good. Jake didn't turn around. Let them hate me. Let them fear me. One of them is already trying to kill me. The rest can get in line. Carl left without another word. Jake heard his boots on the wooden floor, heard the door close. He was alone now. Alone in a house, surrounded by potential killers. Alone with his suspicions and his anger. The ranch his father built had become a prison. And Jake was both the warden and most endangered inmate. He checked his revolver again. 6 bullets. Would that be enough? How many enemies did he have now? How many men had he pushed too far with his suspicion and his accusations? It didn't matter. He would survive this. He would find the shooter, and he would make them pay. The night deepened. Jake didn't sleep. He couldn't. Sleep meant vulnerability. Sleep meant death. So he sat in the darkness and watched and waited. Somewhere out there, a killer was doing the same. The question was, who would make the next move? And who would survive when they did? The second day began with another gunshot. This time, the bullet shattered Jake's bedroom window while he was downstairs. Glass rained onto his bed. If he had been sleeping, if he had trusted enough to close his eyes, he would be dead. Jake ran upstairs with his revolver drawn. The room was destroyed. Glass everywhere. The bullet had lodged in the far wall. He pried it out with his knife. Another .45 caliber, same as yesterday. Carl and 4 ranch hands burst through the door. They stopped when they saw Jake standing there, unharmed, holding the bullet. "Where were you?" Jake's voice was dangerous. "All of you. Where were you when that shot was fired?" The men looked at each other. One of them, a younger hand named Pete, spoke up. "We were in the barn, moving hay, all of us. Carl was with us." Jake studied their faces. Pete looked scared. The others looked angry. Carl looked tired. Any of them could be lying. All of them could be lying. He pushed past them and went downstairs. Someone had taken another shot. Someone was escalating. Someone wanted him to know they could get to him anywhere, anytime. Jake walked outside. The ranch yard was empty. The sun was barely up. Whoever fired that shot was already gone, already hidden. Jake looked toward the tree line 200 yards away. Perfect shooting distance. Perfect cover. He started walking toward the trees. Carl called after him, but Jake ignored it. He needed to see. Needed to know. Needed to find something, anything, that would tell him who was trying to kill him. The trees were thick with morning shadow. Jake moved carefully, his revolver ready. Birds sang above him. Leaves rustled in the breeze. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed peaceful. But someone had stood here minutes ago with a rifle pointed at his house. He found the spot. Broken branches. Disturbed leaves. Boot prints in the soft earth. Jake knelt and studied them. Size 10, maybe 11. That eliminated some suspects, but not enough. Half his ranch hands wore boots that size. Something else caught his eye. A cigarette butt. Still warm. Jake picked it up carefully. Hand-rolled. Cheap tobacco. That narrowed it down. Only 3 of his men rolled their own cigarettes. Pete, a man named Luis, and Carl. Jake's blood went cold. Carl, his father's friend. The man he trusted most. Could it be? He heard movement behind him. Jake spun, his revolver raised. Pete stood there, hands up, eyes wide. "Easy, boss. I just came to help." Jake kept the gun pointed at Pete's chest. "You roll your own cigarettes?" "Sometimes, when money's tight." Pete looked at the gun nervously. "You think I did this?" Jake didn't answer. He studied the younger man's face. Pete was 23. Been on the ranch for 2 years. Good worker. Quiet. Kept to himself. That could mean innocent. That could mean guilty. "Where did you sleep last night?" "In the bunkhouse. Same as always." "Anyone see you there all night?" Pete hesitated. "I went out for a smoke around midnight. Couldn't sleep." Jake's finger tightened on the trigger. "You went out. In the middle of the night. When someone might be planning another attack." "I just needed air." Pete's voice rose. "I didn't shoot at you. I wouldn't. You've been good to me." Jake wanted to believe him. But belief required trust, and trust had nearly gotten him killed twice. "So you were awake and outside when someone could have been setting up for this morning's shot." "I didn't see anyone, I swear." Pete took a step back. "You're not thinking straight, boss. You're scared and angry, and you're starting to see enemies everywhere. Maybe that's because enemies are everywhere." Jake lowered the gun slightly. "Go back to the house. Don't leave the property. Don't talk to anyone about this conversation." Pete nodded quickly and turned to leave. Jake watched him go. The young man moved fast, almost running. That could be fear. That could be guilt. Jake couldn't tell anymore. He looked down at the cigarette butt in his hand. 3 suspects. 1 piece of evidence. Not enough to accuse anyone. Not enough to trust anyone. Jake walked back toward the ranch house. The morning sun felt wrong now. Too bright. Too cheerful. His ranch had become a battlefield, and he was losing ground every hour. Carl met him at the porch. "Find anything?"
"Boot prints." Jake showed him the cigarette butt.
"And this. Hand-rolled. Cheap tobacco." Carl's face didn't change. "That could be Pete, Luis, or me."
I know.
Jake met his eyes. "Which one of you wants me dead?" Carl's jaw clenched. "If you have to ask me that, you've already lost."
He turned and walked away.
Jake watched him go. Maybe Carl was right. Maybe suspecting everyone meant trusting no one, and trusting no one meant being alone, and being alone meant defeat.
But what choice did he have?
Someone was hunting him. Someone he knew. Someone he paid. Someone he might even have called a friend before all this started. The ranch hands were gathering near the barn. Jake could see them talking, gesturing, looking toward the house. They were planning something. A delegation, maybe. Or a mutiny. Jake went inside and locked the door. He moved through the house, checking windows, checking locks, checking sightlines. His home had become a fortress. His ranch had become enemy territory. He heard knocking at the front door, loud and insistent. Jake grabbed his rifle and approached carefully. Through the window he saw 5 of his men standing on the porch. No guns visible, but that didn't mean they weren't armed. Jake opened the door but kept the rifle ready. "What do you want?" A man named Danny stepped forward. He was older, maybe 50, with gray in his beard.
We want to talk.
"About all this craziness? About how you're treating us like criminals? Someone tried to kill me twice." Jake's voice was flat. "Until I know who, everyone is a suspect." "That's not right." Danny's voice had an edge to it. "We've worked for you for years. Some of us knew your father. You can't just decide we're all murderers. I can decide anything I want. It's my ranch." Another man spoke up. A hand named Victor. "Used to be your ranch. Now it's a prison. You got us locked down, not paying us, treating us like dirt. We didn't sign up for this." Jake raised the rifle slightly. "Then leave. Door's open. You're free to go any time." "Without our pay?" Danny's face reddened. "We earned that money. You can't keep it." Jake's finger moved near the trigger. "Someone shot at me from the tree line this morning. Someone who smokes hand-rolled cigarettes. Someone who wears size 10 boots. Someone who knew exactly where my bedroom was. That person is on this ranch. Maybe it's one of you. Maybe it's all of you working together. I don't know, and I don't care. Until I figure it out, nobody gets paid and nobody gets trusted." The men looked at each other. Jake saw anger in their faces, saw resentment, saw something that might have been murder. He tightened his grip on the rifle. "You're making a big mistake, boss." Victor's voice was low and threatening. "You're turning friends into enemies. You're creating the very thing you're afraid of. Maybe." Jake stepped back and started to close the door. "Or maybe I'm staying alive, which is more than I can say for whoever comes at me next." He slammed the door and locked it. Through the window he watched the men walk away. They were talking animatedly, planning something. Jake was sure of it. He moved to the study and looked out at the ranch. The land his father loved. The legacy he was supposed to protect. Now it was all falling apart. Trust destroyed. Relationships shattered. All because someone wanted him dead and he couldn't figure out who. The day crawled by. Jake stayed inside. Stayed armed. Stayed alert. No more shots came, but the tension built like a storm ready to break. As darkness fell, Jake saw lights moving in the bunkhouse. Saw shadows gathering. The men were meeting. Discussing their options. Maybe planning their next move. Jake loaded extra ammunition. Checked every weapon in the house. Positioned himself where he could watch all the approaches. If they came for him tonight, he would be ready. He would take as many as he could with him, but the night stayed quiet. No attack came, just silence and darkness, and the weight of paranoia pressing down like a physical thing. Jake didn't sleep. Couldn't sleep. He sat in his father's old chair with a rifle across his lap and waited for whatever came next. Enemies all around. Trust nowhere, and the terrible knowledge that he had done this to himself. His suspicion had created this situation as surely as the bullets that started it. But what else could he do? Trust someone and end up dead? Believe in loyalty and take a bullet to the back? No. Better to be alone. Better to be hated. Better to survive as a tyrant than die as a fool. The third morning brought no gunshots, just an eerie silence that was somehow worse. Jake watched the sun rise over his ranch and wondered if today would be the day everything finally collapsed, the day his men turned on him completely. The day the shooter finally got through his defenses. He ventured outside with his rifle. The ranch yard was empty. No one at the barn. No one at the bunkhouse. The silence was absolute. Jake's heart pounded. Where were they? What were they planning? He walked toward the bunkhouse slowly, scanning every window, every doorway. The door hung open. Jake approached with his rifle raised. The bunkhouse was empty, beds unmade, personal items scattered, but no people. 12 men worked for him yesterday. Now all of them were gone. Jake ran to the barn. Empty. The stable. Every building on the ranch was abandoned. His entire crew had vanished in the night. He stood in the middle of the ranch yard, turning in circles. Had they all left? Had they given up and gone home? Or was this a trap? Were they watching him right now from hiding spots, waiting for the perfect shot? Movement caught his eye. Someone on horseback, riding in from the east pasture. Jake raised his rifle, then lowered it. Carl. The foreman was alone, riding slowly, his hands visible and empty. Carl dismounted and walked toward Jake. His face was grave. They're gone. All of them. Packed up last night and rode out before dawn. Why didn't you go with them? Jake kept his distance, kept his rifle ready. Because I made a promise to your father. Carl's voice was tired. I told him I'd watch over you. I told him I'd protect this ranch. I don't break my word. Even when you make it damn near impossible. Jake studied the older man. Carl looked exhausted, worn down. But also steady, solid. If he was the shooter, he was the best actor Jake had ever seen. You expect me to believe you stayed out of loyalty? I don't expect you to believe anything. Carl shook his head. You've decided everyone's your enemy. Fine. But those men left because of you. Not because of some mysterious shooter. Because you treated them like criminals. You pushed them away with your suspicion and your accusations. Someone shot at me. Jake's voice rose. Someone tried to kill me. Was I supposed to throw a party? Was I supposed to trust people who might be planning my murder? You were supposed to investigate. To think. To use your head instead of your fear. Carl stepped closer. Your father built this ranch on trust. On treating men fairly. On giving them a reason to be loyal. You've destroyed all of that in 3 days. My father is dead. Jake's grip tightened on the rifle. And I plan to stay alive. If that means being alone, so be it. You're not alone. Carl gestured around the empty ranch. You're abandoned. There's a difference. Alone means you chose it. Abandoned means everyone else chose to leave you. The words hit Jake like a physical blow. He looked around at the empty buildings, the silent barn, the deserted bunkhouse. Carl was right. His crew hadn't just left. They had abandoned him. Given up on him. Decided he wasn't worth staying for. Maybe they were right. Maybe he had become someone not worth staying for. Jake lowered the rifle. What do I do now? First, you accept that you made mistakes. Carl's voice softened. Then you figure out who really wants you dead, because I don't think it was any of those men who just left. What makes you say that? Because if one of them wanted you dead, they would have done it by now. Carl pointed at the tree line. 2 shots for distance. Both missed. That's not a ranch hand who knows your routine. That's someone who doesn't know you at all. Someone from outside. Jake felt his certainty crumble. He had been so sure. So convinced that the enemy was among his own men, that betrayal came from within. But what if Carl was right? What if he had been looking in the wrong direction the whole time? The accountant. Jake's mind raced. He disappeared 3 months ago. What if he's back? What if he's trying to finish what he started? That's one possibility. Carl walked toward the house. There are others. You've made enemies, Jake. Business rivals. Men you outbid for land. People who blame you for their failures. The list is long. Jake followed him. So I destroyed my relationships with good men while the real enemy watched from outside. That about sums it up. Carl opened the front door. Now the question is whether you can fix what you broke, whether those men will ever trust you again. Jake sat down heavily in his father's chair. The ranch felt enormous and empty around him. He had been so focused on internal threats that he never considered external ones. So convinced of betrayal that he created it through his own actions. I need to find them. Jake looked at Carl. The men who left. I need to apologize. To explain. Apologizing is a start. Carl poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed one to Jake. But explaining your paranoia doesn't excuse it. You hurt them. Accused them. Took away their pay and their dignity. Some things can't be fixed with words. Jake drank the whiskey in one swallow. Then what do? You prove you've changed. You find the real shooter. You clear their names publicly. And you pay them double what you owe them. Carl finished his own drink. Then maybe some of them will consider coming back. Jake nodded slowly. First things first. We find out who's really trying to kill me. Carl stood. I'll ride to town. Ask questions. See if anyone's seen your accountant or anyone else who might have a grudge. You stay here. Stay armed.
Don't trust anyone who shows up.
Not even you? Jake tried to smile, but it came out bitter. Especially not me. Carl headed for the door. I'm the only one who stayed. That makes me either the most loyal man you've got or the most dangerous. You'll have to decide which. He left Jake alone in the house. The silence was oppressive. Jake walked through the empty rooms, seeing them as if for the first time. His father's pictures on the walls, the furniture his mother chose, the history and legacy of everything they built. And he had nearly destroyed it all with suspicion and fear. Jake went to his father's desk and pulled out the ranch records. Names and addresses of everyone who worked for him, everyone he had driven away. He would make this right. Somehow. If he survived long enough. The afternoon passed slowly. Jake stayed vigilant but also started planning. Lists of enemies, possible motives, places to search. He was thinking clearly now, not just reacting in fear. A sound outside made him grab his rifle. Hoofbeats. Multiple horses. Jake moved to the window. 6 riders approached the ranch. They wore masks. They carried rifles. And they were coming straight for the house. Jake's blood turned to ice. This was it. The real attack. The one he should have been preparing for instead of terrorizing his own men. He checked his ammunition. 12 rounds in the rifle, 6 in his revolver. 18 bullets against 6 men. The odds weren't good, but they weren't impossible. The riders spread out, surrounding the house. Jake moved from window to window, trying to track them all. They were professional, coordinated. This wasn't some angry ranch hand. This was a planned assault.
A voice called out from the yard. Jake Miller.
We know you're in there. Come out and this goes easy. Stay inside and we burn you out. Jake recognized the voice. It was muffled by the mask but familiar. Where had he heard it before? Who sent you? Jake shouted back. Was it the accountant? Is he paying you? Laughter from multiple directions. The accountant is long gone, Jake. This is about something else entirely. This is about you taking what doesn't belong to you. Jake's mind raced. Land. It had to be about land. 3 months ago, he bought a section of property at auction. Beat out several other bidders. Prime grazing land with water rights. Someone was angry enough about losing that deal to hire killers. Who wants the land that badly? Jake chambered around. I'll sell it back. Whatever they paid you, I'll double it. Just leave. Too late for deals. The voice was closer now. You had your chance to play fair. You chose to outbid everyone. You chose to take everything for yourself. Now you pay the price. A bottle crashed through the window. Glass and liquid splashed across the floor. The smell of kerosene filled the room. Jake dove behind the desk as a lit match followed. Fire erupted instantly. Flames raced across the floor, up the curtains, across the furniture. Jake fired through the window, heard a yell of pain. 1 down, 5 to go. He ran for the back door as the fire spread. Smoke filled the house. Heat pressed against his back. His father's ranch, his family's legacy, was burning around him. Jake burst through the back door and rolled left as bullets tore up the ground where he had been. 2 riders came around the corner. Jake fired twice. 1 man fell from his horse. The other wheeled away, cursing. 3 left, plus however many he had wounded. Jake ran for the barn. It was the only building big enough to defend. The only place with multiple exits and clear sight lines. Bullets kicked up dirt around his feet. Jake dove through the barn door and scrambled behind a hay bale. He counted his remaining ammunition. 8 rounds in the rifle, 6 in the revolver. 14 bullets against 3 or possibly 4 attackers. The odds were improving. Smoke poured from the house now. Orange flames licked through the roof. Jake watched his home burn and felt rage replace fear. These men had taken everything from him. His peace. His trust. His crew. And now his house. They would pay for every bit of it. A shadow moved near the barn door. Jake fired. The shadow dropped. Another voice cursed in the darkness. 2 left for sure, maybe 1 more wounded somewhere. Jake moved to a different position. Never stay in one place. His father taught him that. Keep moving. Keep them guessing. Make every shot count. The remaining attackers were cautious now. They had lost half their number. They knew Jake was dangerous. They knew this was no longer an easy job, different from before. Younger, scared. We can still make a deal, Miller. Let us go and we'll tell you who hired us. Jake almost laughed. You're in no position to make deals. You're surrounded by open ground. You've got no cover. And I've got all night. We've got the numbers. Had the numbers. Jake fired at a shape moving near the water trough. Missed, but came close enough to make the man dive for cover. Now you're just scattered and scared. Tell me who hired you, and maybe I let you live. Silence. Jake waited. Patience was a weapon, too. Let them think. Let them realize their situation. Let them understand they had made a terrible mistake. Movement to his left. Jake spun and fired. A man screamed and went down, clutching his leg. 1 left now. Just 1. Jake reloaded the rifle methodically. His hands were steady. His breathing was calm. This was what he should have been doing from the start. Fighting the real enemy. Not tearing apart his own ranch from within. The last attacker was gone. Jake heard hoofbeats fading into the distance. The man had run. Smart choice.
Cowardly but smart.
Jake emerged from the barn carefully. The ranch yard was littered with bodies. 3 dead. 1 wounded badly, 1 fled. And his house still burning. He walked to the wounded man and pulled off his mask. He didn't recognize the face. A stranger. A hired gun. Professional killers sent to eliminate a problem. Jake knelt beside the man. Who hired you? The man coughed blood. He was gut-shot. Not going to make it. Tried to talk, but nothing came out except a name whispered so quietly Jake almost missed it.
Frank Maxwell.
Jake sat back in shock. Maxwell owned the ranch to the south. They had been neighbors for 20 years, friendly rivals. Or so Jake thought. The land auction. Maxwell had bid against him, lost by $5,000. Jake never imagined the man would go this far over a property dispute. The wounded man's breathing stopped. Jake closed the dead eyes and stood. 4 bodies in his yard. His house destroyed. His crew scattered. All because he had been looking for enemies in the wrong places. Carl came riding in hard, his rifle out. He saw the bodies, saw the burning house, saw Jake standing there covered in soot and blood. What in God's name happened here? The real enemy showed up. Jake's voice was hollow. Maxwell sent them. Professional killers. Tried to burn me out and finish me off. Carl dismounted and surveyed the destruction. Did you get them all? 3 dead. 1 wounded died a minute ago. 1 got away. Jake looked at his burning home. The roof was collapsing now. Nothing could be saved. Maxwell wanted me dead over that land deal, the one I won at auction 3 months ago. That's when all this started. Carl's face hardened. The stolen money, the poisoned cattle, the fire in the hay barn. All of it was Maxwell. So happy he's been trying to drive you out or kill you, whichever came first. And I spent the whole time suspecting my own men. Jake felt sick. I destroyed everything my father built because I was too paranoid to see the truth. I accused loyal workers. I drove them away. I became the very thing I was afraid of. A man who couldn't trust anyone. A man alone. You're not alone. Carl put a hand on his shoulder. I'm here. And when we ride to town and report this, when people hear what really happened, some of those men might come back. If you give them reason to. Jake watched the flames consume the last of the house. His childhood home, his family's legacy, reduced to ash because of his mistakes and Maxwell's greed. Why didn't you leave with the others? Carl smiled sadly. Because I know you, Jake. Better than you know yourself sometimes. I saw a scared man making scared decisions. But underneath that fear, I saw your father's son. A good man who just needed to remember who he was. I don't know if I deserve that faith. Jake turned away from the fire. I hurt people who trusted me. I believe the worst of everyone. That's not my father's son. That's a coward. A coward would have stayed hidden when those riders came. Carl gestured at the bodies.
You fought back.
You defended your land. You survived when 6 armed men wanted you dead. That takes courage. The question is what you do next. That takes character. Jake picked up his rifle and started toward the stable. His horse was still there, untouched by the fire. First we ride to Maxwell's ranch. We settle this. Then we ride to town. File charges. Let the law handle what's left. And after that? Carl followed him. After that I find every man who worked for me and I apologize. Face to face. No excuses. No explanations. Just honest apologies for honest mistakes. Jake mounted his horse. And if any of them want to come back, I'll pay them what I owe them, plus a bonus for putting up with my insanity. That's a start. Carl mounted his own horse. But rebuilding trust takes time. More time than it took to destroy it.
I know.
Jake looked back at the burning ruins one last time. His father built that house with his own hands. Built this ranch from nothing. And Jake had nearly lost it all because he forgot the most important lesson his father taught him. Trust is the foundation of everything. Without it, you're just building on sand. They rode toward Maxwell's ranch as the sun set behind them. Smoke from Jake's burning house rose into the sky like a black pillar, a marker of his failure and his awakening. Tomorrow would bring consequences. Legal trouble for Maxwell. Difficult conversations with former employees. The hard work of rebuilding would have been destroyed. But tonight, Jake felt something he hadn't felt in days. Clarity. Purpose. And the understanding that the worst enemy he faced wasn't some mysterious shooter. It was the paranoia and distrust that had poisoned his own mind. Carl rode beside him in comfortable silence. The foreman had stayed when everyone else left, had believed in Jake when Jake couldn't believe in himself. That kind of loyalty was rare. The kind of loyalty Jake had taken for granted and nearly destroyed. Never again. Whatever came next, Jake would face it differently, with open eyes instead of suspicious ones, with trust instead of fear, with the wisdom to know that protecting yourself from enemies didn't mean turning friends into suspects. The lights of Maxwell's ranch appeared ahead. Jake loosened his rifle in its scabbard. One more confrontation, one more fight, but this time he knew who the real enemy was, and this time he wouldn't be alone. Maxwell's ranch house was dark when they arrived. Jake and Carl dismounted quietly and approached on foot. No lights meant either everyone was asleep or something was wrong. Jake's instincts said the latter. The front door stood open. Not good. Jake drew his revolver and entered slowly. Carl followed with his rifle ready. The house was empty. Furniture overturned, paper scattered everywhere, signs of a hasty departure. Maxwell was gone, probably riding hard for the border or the nearest train station. The man knew his hired guns had failed, knew Jake would come for him. Knew the law would be following close behind. They searched the house methodically. Found nothing useful until Carl called from the study. "Jake, you need to see this." Jake entered the small room. Papers covered the desk. Financial records. Land deals. And letters. Dozens of letters between Maxwell and various business partners. Jake picked one up and started reading. His blood ran cold as the full scope of Maxwell's plan became clear. It wasn't just about one land deal. Maxwell had been systematically trying to bankrupt Jake for years. The accountant hadn't stolen money on his own. Maxwell had paid him to do it. The poisoned cattle, the barn fire, all coordinated attacks meant to weaken Jake financially until he had no choice but to sell. And it almost worked. Jake sat down heavily. If those hired guns had killed me tonight, Maxwell would have bought this whole ranch from my estate for pennies on the dollar. He would have gotten everything. Carl read over his shoulder. This is premeditated. Conspiracy. Multiple felonies. Maxwell's going to prison for a long time. If we can catch him. We'll catch him. Jake stood up. He gathered the letters and financial records. This is evidence. We take it to the sheriff. Let the law do its job. What about the ranch? What about rebuilding? Jake looked around Maxwell's abandoned study. The house felt cold and empty, like his own ranch had felt after everyone left. That's the price of greed and paranoia. Both Maxwell and I paid it. He lost everything trying to take what wasn't his. I almost lost everything suspecting everyone around me. At least you figured it out in time. Carl headed for the door. Maxwell's finished. His ranch will be seized, his name ruined. Justice served. They rode toward town as dawn broke over the Texas plains. Jake felt exhausted but also relieved. The mystery was solved. The enemy identified. But the hardest part was still ahead, facing the men he had wronged, admitting his mistakes, trying to rebuild what he had destroyed. The town sheriff listened to their story with increasing shock. The evidence was overwhelming. Maxwell's entire conspiracy laid bare in the documents they provided. Within an hour, deputies rode out to search for the fleeing ranch owner. Word spread quickly through town about what had happened. By noon, people Jake hadn't seen in days started appearing. His former employees. They came one by one to the hotel where Jake was staying. Cautious, uncertain. But they came. Pete was first. The young ranch hand stood in the doorway looking nervous. "Boss, we heard what happened. I heard about Maxwell and the hired guns. Heard your house burned down?" Jake stood and faced him. "I accused you of trying to kill me. I suspected you without cause. I treated you like a criminal when you were innocent. I'm sorry." Pete nodded slowly. "You did treat us pretty rough. Made us all feel like we couldn't be trusted. Like we were enemies instead of employees." "I know." Jake met his eyes. "I was scared and I handled it wrong. I let fear turn me into someone I'm not. Someone my father would be ashamed of. I can't undo what I did. But I can pay what I owe you and ask if you'd consider coming back. The ranch needs rebuilding. I need help, and I promise to do better. To be better." Pete considered this. "The others are talking about it. Some are real angry still. Some might be willing to give you another chance." He paused. "I'm willing. You gave me a job when I needed one. You treated me fair before all this craziness started. I believe people can change. I believe you can change. Thank you." Jake felt gratitude wash over him. "That means more than you know." One by one, the others came, some to accept his apology. some to tell him exactly what they thought of his behavior. All of them deserved their say. Jake listened to every word, took every criticism, accepted every angry statement. He had earned their anger. The least he could do was hear it. By evening, 4 of his former employees had agreed to return. Not all of them, not even most of them. But it was a start, a foundation to rebuild on. Danny, Victor, Luis, and Pete. 4 men willing to trust him again. 4 men willing to believe he could change. Carl sat with Jake in the hotel restaurant that night. They were both exhausted, both covered in soot and dirt. Both ready for this nightmare to end. You did good today. Facing them like that, taking responsibility, had to be done. Jake stirred his coffee but didn't drink it. I owe them more than words. I need to prove I've changed. Show them, not tell them.
You will.
Carl finally smiled. Your father would be proud. Not of the mistakes you made, but of how you owned them. How you're trying to fix them. That takes guts. The next morning brought news. Maxwell had been caught trying to board a train 2 counties over. He was in custody. The sheriff expected a trial within the month. Justice was moving forward. The conspiracy would be exposed. Maxwell's reputation destroyed. Jake spent the day arranging for rebuilding supplies. His house was gone, but the land remained. The barn and outbuildings were intact. With help, he could reconstruct what was lost, make the ranch whole again. The 4 returning employees arrived at sunset. They looked at the burned ruins of the main house without speaking. Then Pete said what they were all thinking. Going to take a lot of work to fix this place up. I know. Jake stood beside them. But we'll do it together. All of us. Equal partners in rebuilding. Partners? Victor raised an eyebrow. That's different from employees. Jake nodded. This ranch isn't mine alone. It belongs to everyone who works it. Everyone who dedicates their time and sweat to making it succeed. So yes. Partners. You'll get a fair wage plus a share of the profits. You'll have a say in decisions. You'll be respected. That's my promise. The men looked at each other. Finally, Danny spoke. That's the kind of deal we can work with. That's the kind of boss we can trust. They shook hands in front of the burned house. 5 men starting over. 5 men choosing to trust again. It wasn't the full crew Jake once had. It wasn't his father's ranch anymore. But it was something new. Something better, perhaps. Something built on honesty instead of fear. The weeks that followed were hard. Rebuilding was slow work. Money was tight after paying back wages and bonuses. But the men worked without complaint. They worked because they believed in what they were building, not just a house, not just a ranch, but a new way of doing things. A better way. Maxwell's trial was brief. The evidence overwhelming. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison. His ranch was seized and auctioned. Jake didn't bid on it. He had learned that lesson. Some things weren't worth having if you had to destroy others to get them. One evening, about a month after the attack, Jake sat on the porch of the new bunkhouse watching the sunset. The main house was still being rebuilt. It would take another month at least, but progress was visible. The ranch was healing. So was Jake. Carl joined him with 2 glasses of whiskey. To new beginnings. He raised his glass. Jake clinked his glass against Carl's. To trust. The hardest thing to build and the easiest thing to destroy. They drank in comfortable silence. The ranch spread out before them in the golden light. Cattle grazing peacefully, horses moving in the corral, the sound of hammers and saws as the work crews finished for the day. It was beautiful. It was home. And finally, after everything, Jake could see it clearly. His father had built this place on trust. Jake had nearly destroyed it with suspicion. But now maybe he was learning to build it again the right way, with open eyes, with honest hands, with the understanding that strength didn't come from standing alone.
It came from standing together. Pete walked by carrying lumber.
He nodded to Jake and Carl, making good progress on the house. Should have walls up by next week? That's good news. Jake smiled. Thanks for all your work, Pete. Just doing my job. Pete grinned. Well, my job and my partnership share. Still getting used to that idea. You'll get used to it. Jake watched the young man walk away.
We all will.
Carl finished his whiskey and stood. I'm turning in. Long day tomorrow. He paused at the door. Your father would be real proud of you, Jake. What you've become. What you're building here? I hope so. Jake looked out at the ranch one more time. I'm trying to honor his legacy.
The right way this time.
You already are. Carl disappeared into the bunkhouse. Jake sat alone on the porch as the stars came out. Somewhere out there, Maxwell was in a cell. His hired guns were dead or captured. The conspiracy was over. Justice had been served. But the real victory wasn't in defeating enemies. It was in regaining friends, in learning to trust again, in understanding that the worst enemy he ever faced was his own fear and paranoia. The ranch was quiet now, peaceful, safe. Jake finally felt like he could breathe, could relax, could believe that tomorrow would come without bullets and fire and betrayal. He stood and walked to where the new house was taking shape, ran his hand along the fresh timber. This house would be better than the last one, stronger, built with lessons learned and wisdom earned, just like he was trying to be a better man, stronger, built from the ruins of his mistakes. The rancher, who couldn't trust anyone, had finally learned to trust again. It hadn't been easy. It had cost him nearly everything. But in losing everything, he had found what really mattered. Not land, not money, not pride or power, but the people who stood beside you. The partners who worked with you. The friends who forgave you. The trust that made everything else possible. Jake Miller would never forget that lesson. Would never take it for granted again. Would spend the rest of his life proving he deserved the second chance he had been given. As he walked back to the bunkhouse, Jake looked up at the stars. Somewhere up there, he liked to think his father was watching. Seeing what his son had become. Seeing the ranch not as it was, but as it would be. Built on trust instead of suspicion. On partnership instead of paranoia. On wisdom earned through failure and redemption claimed through honesty. It was the ranch's father always wanted. And finally, Jake was the man who could build it. Tomorrow would bring more work. More challenges, more opportunities to prove himself worthy of the trust others placed in him. But tonight, Jake Miller could sleep peacefully for the first time in weeks. Not because all his enemies were gone, but because he finally understood that the greatest enemy had always been himself. And that enemy, at last, was defeated.